All right. So, guys, I was going through some of the questions. There's some good ones out there already. So I will start with a bit of an intro to Environment for Revit. So it's a platform that is an add-on that sits on top of Revit, and it still uses native Revit tools to do what you need to do. So if you send this file to someone else, they can still use it. So you can see on the screen here, there's it's sort of the updated toolbar of all the tools that are in Environment for Revit. So it's there to help you create topple surfaces, modify them after the fact, help you get all of your planting in there, manage your planting, plant it. As you can see, there's some scatter tools there, and import and export data from your consultants and back to your consultants, help you with your coordinate systems and geolocation of everything, and generally improve the landscape architecture workflows that some of them already sort of you can do in Revit, but it takes a long time and a lot of work. So this speeds your work up, gives you opportunities that you would not have had before, because we can kind of get into the API and do things that way. And there are a ton of fantastic tools. Hopefully you can see them all there. And there's some really great new ones. That alignment tool you're seeing kind of right in the middle, fantastic. My new favorite tool. So I hope that's a decent summary for now. I'll turn it over to Nehama and she will continue.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, it's really hard to introduce Environment for Revit these days because we have like over, I think, 70 features by today. But you can definitely say that, yeah, topographies, plant, hardscape are our main area. Although we did add a few nice features for interoperability in the past year. So yeah, it's worth exploring, I guess. But today we're going to focus solely on topographies, although there's like a lot of things around it. So I thought, getting all the questions about topography throughout the years, I thought that you and I could start with kind of an introduction to topographies. Hopefully that would already cover some of the questions that are already in the chat. So we'll do this introduction and to topographies and toposolids, and then we're going to cover some topics, and then we're going to jump right into the questions. And that's really challenging because for me, it's like the first time doing live questions. So hopefully we'll be able to answer all of them. So I actually wanted to start with general concept that we're always talking about. And it's kind of, we thought we invented it, but it's kind of a general grading logic that we at Environment for Revit just gave it a name and we added tools for that. But I think it's one of the most important concepts to keep in mind when working with topographies in Revit, no matter the version you're at, and that's the reference surface. And I hope that throughout the webinar today and with your questions, you'll kind of get the idea of why it's such a useful thing to make your work so much more simple. So generally, what is a reference surface? So take a look at this parking lot, right? The grading of the parking lot is so simple. We just need to have all the water drain into the gardening area, right? So you could do the entire grading with just using 4 elevation points. However, we have a lot of different parts to this parking lot, right? So the concept of the reference surface says just create one surface with these 4 points and then align all the other surfaces into it, right? So this is extremely useful when you have different parts to your design. So I like this example. Let's say that you start your project and you design the building pad for a building area, right? And then you move forward in the project and you have to add more details to this building pad. So you wouldn't have to recalculate the elevations of each and every part. You would just divide them and then align all of these parts into the original graded surface that you've had. So I think, Emily, when you and I talked, the best example I could give you was the roofs with the shingles, right? So imagine you're designing a roof. You wouldn't go ahead and design each and every shingle separately. You would just design the different reference surface of a roof, and then all the shingles would automatically go into this roof. So I think in landscape models, we often can create a bunch of reference surfaces like that and then add more details to them. And then another thing that it's really useful, the reference surface for, is when you get like really complex surfaces and, instead of having to kind of calculate the elevations in each and every point, like with modify sub element, I could just like use a few points as efficient as I can be and then adjust my complex surface into it. So that's basically the concept of the reference surface. I would love to hear in the chat if this was like something that you managed to like understand, and we can definitely show an example to this reference surface really quickly.
We can, and I'm just looking at.
So
sorry. I didn't know if you could hear me. I thought I was on mute. I was just looking at the poll. We have about 7% so far that have answered the poll say they're using environment all the time. So we have about 42% who say yes, just starting, and 41. And now that I've mentioned the poll, the numbers are changing a little. So we got 16%, 21% using environment. So we got some people who are out there using it. So hopefully you guys can, give us some feedback on whether you understand that reference surface, because it is kind of important to everything else you're going to be doing in Revit. And this reference surface was introduced in 2024 or 2024, I think. And so if you're still in an older version, we might have, environment was referring to it as a help surface, right? So when you made a topography that you then hosted other elements to, like your floors, it's similar to that, but it's now embedded directly in the topo solid object. There's this background with your main grading on it, and then your shape of your actual solid, be it a hardscape or a softscape, right, is sort of sitting on top of that, and it could only be a portion of it. And I hope that maybe elaborates for some people, because I know I struggled with this when I made that switch in how it worked, but now it's working pretty well. So, and so specifically, the last question here, just can you?
So I think, Emily, what we can do. Yeah.
Sorry, I think there's a lag here.
You were saying?
I was going to say, can you show how to add a reference plane into the topo solid? So I think that's what we were going to start with, a little demo of that. Yeah. If you're, all right. So is that new for you?
All right. So let's take a look at how do I add a reference surface. So basically, if you guys remember, when we're just using meshing and side tools, when we have a topo solid, it's basically like a floor, right? It's composed of like a boundary, right? I can create a boundary of some sort, and let's close it. And then once I have the boundary done and it's flat, then I can start modify each point. And that's basically what the topo solid is. So it's basically a floor with contour lines, right? And so that's how we create topo solid with meshing inside. And what we're doing with environment for Revit, we're kind of marrying the idea of a topo solid and a reference surface. And basically, to create that, we just need to use the topography tools over here. So as I open the topography tools, you can look at them as sort of a tool to create the reference surface and the topo solid at the same time. And the reference surface is like an abstract thing, but it's really in there. So let's take a look. I'm in 2024 version, and I can actually use the edit sketch. So I can start with the boundary. The difference is that with environment tools, you don't have to start with the boundary. You can start with the points. You can place points, draw split lines, right? Edit Sketch. These are tools that you know from the Messingen site. And then the other tools in the topography tools are like the tools to create the reference surface to place a lot of elevation points at once without having to calculate so much. So let's take a look at a very simple example. Let's say that I want to start with the boundary, just like I did with the Messingen site. I'm going to go to a top view and I don't know, let's say that I want this thing to be a road that connects the two streets. Now, so that's the first one. And I'm going to click on finish. And because I started to create my boundary from the topography tools, then I'm going to go back to the topography tools as I click on finish. And now I can start place the elevation points. Instead of doing modify sub element, I have a much more efficient workflow. I can use, for example, the from edge tool to just be able to place elevation points on the edges of both parts of the street over here. By the way, both the streets that you have here, top and bottom, are created from a Civil 3D file. So I didn't even have to build them on my own. That's why they're kind of made into pieces. So you could say that I use the from edge tool. I touch both edges. I have all these points over here. And as I'm clicking on insert points, I already get my reference surface. And by the way, I can also use the main properties to kind of determine what is the type of toposolid that I'm going to use. So I have all the types of my toposolids over here, and I can really change that. So if I go to a top view, I can see if my reference surface covers all my boundary, and that's usually the best situation. And I'm going to click on finish, and that's it. I didn't even have to calculate anything. I was just able to go from here to there. That's the most simple example. So where can this reference surface be super useful? If I just want to add some other design or another part or more details to my design, so I can go over here to topography tools and create something entirely new, right? Let's change the type maybe and go to edit sketch again. And let's say that I want to create something really stupid over here. Like do something like that. And then maybe, I don't know, do something really stupid. I don't know what the purpose of it, landscape wise. I don't know if it's the best design, but that's my design, right? I just want to create something stupid. And I want it to be like another part of the same road, right? So I'm going to click on finish to go back to topography tools. And now instead of redesigning the entire elevation, I could just use the match reference surface to take the points from here, insert points, and then I get the same reference surface for the second toposolid. Click on finish, and I have this design that I wanted to create. So that's the concept of the reference surface, and it was actually the same idea in earlier versions of Revit. Like in 2023, Emily, do you have clients who are still doing 2023 or down maybe? So
you're on mute.
In 2020. Yeah, sorry.
Darn. Sorry. Yes, definitely 2023 and earlier are still hanging on. A lot of people just haven't migrated to 24 yet, let alone 2025. So we still are seeing people a couple years back, definitely.
Yeah. So in 2023 and down, the workflow was pretty much the same. I have to say that in 2024, it's a little bit more efficient because we were able to kind of leverage the toposolid into building our tools and making this entire workflow a lot more efficient. But in 2023, we have the floors, right? And the floors are kind of relating to a reference surface, which is just the topo surface, right? It's just a topography. So in this file, for example, if I go to visibility graphics, you can see that I have one filter that hides all these help surfaces or reference surfaces, whatever you want to call them. Let's turn them on. It's going to look like a big mess, but don't worry, I was super organized, and you can see that every topo surface like that has like a comment that allows me to know that it's not for calculation and which part I created with it. So we just have to be really organized. And to give you a good example, let me select a few of them and isolate them so you'll be able to understand. So over here, I have created this topo surface as a reference surface for these two floors, right? So basically what I did, let me reset the shape. What I did is, instead of having everything in one tool, I have my floor, I have my topo surface, which is the help surface, and then I just go to environment and I use the shape by topography tool to align the floor with the topography. And that's essentially the reference surface. So again, the advantage of that is that every other part that I add to my design could just be aligned with the same topo surface, like with the same reference surface. So essentially, I can have as many reference surfaces like that as I want in my file. But you just have to think, like, what bunch of paths or roadways have the same grading logic that I could just align them to the same surface. And essentially, when you keep all these reference surfaces organized, you can hide them with a work set or with a view filter. I don't know what you're up. You can see some railings stay down. Usually I do host the railings after I modify the floor, because Revit just has a hard time rehosting the railings. But yeah, that's the basic principle of doing that.
And for everybody out there who's either new or using it, you've probably seen this before, but it's incredibly handy, right? If we didn't have that sort of reference surface or, shape by topography tool, we would lose a lot of the functionality about this. And I'm seeing a lot of questions, how do you edit, or how do you integrate topographies with other elements? So really, these two tools are going to make a huge difference on how your topo solid surrounds your building, surrounds other site elements, and uses them as the constraints to define, your starting and ending point of your topography surface, right? So I need, as you can see, an example on the screen there, if you need a pathway to go from point A to point B, and there are different elevations, there's maybe topography you want to just follow already there. That's what these tools are going to do for you. The topography is there. It has a reference surface built in, or it will be the topography that you shape your floor with. And so then we can tweak it from there using, I think I saw a question that said, how do you adjust or add points to a topo surface? And that's pretty much it. You're going to add points to that. So in a few of the screenshots, we'll get into specifics. There are individual points that if you really need to know and place something at a specific elevation, you can add a very specific point to your reference surface or your actual topo solid. And so just in case anybody doesn't know, topography, topo surfaces happened in 2023 and before, and 2024 started topo solids. So we'll try and keep our terminology straight there, but there's a bit of a mix in some of the demos we're using depending on the version we're in. All right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say you're completely right. Like with topography tools, first of all, any topo surface or topo solid you select, in the Modify tab, you'll have the option to either match reference surface or just edit that with topography tools. And if you simply want to add a point, you have the place point, and you can place it relatively to any elevation you want or draw a split line. If you want to place a point in any other way, we can demonstrate many ways, but basically all these ways are ways to add points. You can add points along a model line. You can add points along a 3D edge. You can add points along a face. You can interpolate between 2 points to add points. You can create a line and add points along it, along a slope. And you can use, of course, the match reference surface to just add points from a different surface. So you have many ways to add points, and it just depends on what exactly do you want to do in this specific example.
Yep.
Emily, do you want to take some questions?
Well, I was looking at the first two questions, and actually the second one you were just talking about there is for Sharon. So the first one, though, is for Davis. How do topographies help in site planning and design with Revit? I'll say a little bit, and then Nehama, I know you have a good answer for this. So they, from what I have seen with the clients that I've worked with so far, they are incredibly helpful in being able to visualize what you need and want to do in the context of what the architect is going to give you, all in 3D. Design changes, design options are at your fingertips, and you can see the results immediately. So when you're thinking of a design and you have to imagine it yourself, things can be missing, right? We're not perfect. Some people can visualize in 3D better than others. So that's what I see is just the ability to plan ahead of time is one of the major benefits.
So again, the question was, what were the benefits of topographies within Revit?
How do topographies help in site planning and design within Revit?
Yeah. So you were right about all the things you said. It helps us visualize. And so there's a lot. As a landscape architect, I have to say there's a lot to the 3D aspect of it. It really helps. But there's also other things, because Revit is a BIM software, and we have to remember that. Let's take this project, for example. I have like my existing site model over here, and then I have this area of my new proposed design model. So imagine that at every given stage of my project, I could just go to a certain topo solid and then go over here to calculate earthwork, which, by the way, that's an environment feature. It's good for 2024, and you have this option in other versions. I'm not going to elaborate too much, but just the ability to click here on calculate earthwork and being able to get the earthwork of each and every part of your model. Oops, I'm getting a slight glitch over here.
That's what live does to us, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's obviously calculating right now. It worked like 5 minutes before the webinar, which is so typical to a classic webinar. But I can also demonstrate. This analysis over here in a complete project, right, where we have the existing site and the proposed design. And then we were able to just take each and every topography over here and get the cut and fill calculation of it, and then create a cut and fill schedule. So even, we have the 3D aspect of it, but we also have the aspect of the information that goes along with it, which is so amazing, and it gives you so much leverage as a designer. And then another thing is that you get the automatic contour lines on that, and that's a major design assistant, to just be able to touch both edges and then get the contour lines and then understand what you're dealing with as a designer. That's super helpful.
Yep. So there are a lot of benefits to this, and not only those, you are also able to, you're collaborating now with the architect. Design changes are going to be recognized faster. Information is going to be shared faster with all teams. So you're at the BIM table now if you're using Revit for landscape design. So hopefully those are enough of the benefits for you. Mm-hmm. If we go next, this is, again, it's a fairly straightforward question, but we'll try and keep it concise because it's a big one also. What are the methods for creating a topography in Revit? So that's for Sharon. There are many methods. So again, I'll just elaborate a little bit. Revit has a topography tool or a TopoSolid tool, and that is often where we all start. But the environment tools specifically have, as you've been seeing, the specific topography tools. So that one that's on the screen there was TopoSolid. That's native to Revit. And now in environment, we have topography tools, which allow you to make a TopoSolid, but using or starting from very specific locations. So when Nehama made that pathway that you see on the screen, she made it by picking two edges, and the tool basically figured out what those elevations were and created the surface and the contour lines sloping between them. So that's just one way. So the topography tools are something we can elaborate on. Do you want to show a few of them?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Like, what are the, I was just thinking about it today. What are the methods to creating a TopoSolid? So of course there's a TopoSolid the way we showed before, the native one where you just create a boundary and start to lifting the point. For me, I always use the topography tools. I always start with them or edit with them. And the basic concept of the topography tools is that you could just edit, sketch, and create something flat. You could just edit point by point like you would normally. But then you can also do something that is more complex. So I think there was a question here also, like, can you show it from the start? So I can show you a nice example of how I envision like the seamless collaboration between architects and landscape architects, but also how working with the topography tools can really help you in the design process. So let's imagine that I have to design the backyard over here of these two buildings, right? And I have to start to think, how do I slope everything? And how do I connect these two buildings? So it's like one backyard. And as a site engineer, as a landscape architect, I have a lot of things to consider. So instead of printing it and calculating it, I can actually use environment topography tools as the starting point and to think from there. So here's an idea. I know I want to start from the buildings, so I'm going to use the from edge, and I'm just going to place some points on the edges of the buildings, right? And click on and insert points, and I can already start to see the contour lines created between them. So as a landscape architect, that tells me a lot. And then let's go to a plan view, which is really convenient to most of us, and then use the slope path tool. So basically what the slope path tool does is I can select any point over here. Let's select this one. And then I have this line and say, all right, in this vector until this point, I want to have -2% or -1% slope. That gives me an indication of start and end. I can insert points, and I can do the same to all edges. So it's like I don't have to calculate. All I have to know is that the regulation requires me to send the water away from the building in a -1%, right? So I'm going to do that. That's it. And then I have a really bad problem. All right, let's go ahead and click on finish. And I didn't do anything. I just connected the two buildings and gave it, the slope. And I'm just using this topography to start to understand what am I doing here. And then look at what I have here. If I'm going to use Revit's spot slope tool to get an idea of what my slopes are, you can already see that all my water are going from this building to this building. And this guy is not going to be happy when it rains, right? So I have to do something about it. And I wouldn't even know it. I mean, I would know it as a landscape architect, but using these tools is just another way for me to understand what's going on over here. So let's go select this TopoSolid, go back to the topography tools and see what I can do with it. So basically, I want to send the water in this direction, right? And something like that. So instead of calculating, again, I can take the slope path tool and do something like that. Maybe send the water negative 2% over here. And then maybe negative 1% over here. And of course, I'll have to edit my boundary. So let's delete this one. And my boundary would just be the lot boundary for this case. And that already gives me so much information. Let's go to the messing inside tool, place some contour labels over here. And I can get a very good indication of what my elevations are over here, right? So now I can start to design over that information. And I'm going to do something really nice. I'm going to actually draw lines, just like we're in AutoCAD, and define, the elevation of a specific contour lines. I'm going to do it using model lines. So here's another method of adding elevation points, right? We saw from edge, we saw slope path. Now let's use the model lines over here. So I want to take the 980 contour and just do something like that. I want it to go this way because I don't want to create a swimming pool over here, right? It's gonna be a pond. It's not good for me. And I'm gonna take the 960. I'm gonna do something like that. So that's a very intuitive way for landscape architects or site designers to just decide on a plan view, as if it was AutoCAD, that's what I want my contour lines to look like, right? So then I have to assign elevation to them. I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but I have the set elevation tool. So I know I want to start with 960 every 20 centimeters. I'm just going to click 1, 2. And if we look at it at 3D, you can see that these lines are in a correct elevation. I can also test and see if they're in correct elevation. Let's click over here. Yeah, that's 980. And that over here, that over here is 960, which is great for me. All right. So now again, I'm going to pick this topography and edit that again. Don't worry if this process is too much for you, but I'm just going to add line here. So I'm just going to add these model lines. Oops, sorry. I'm just going to add these model lines into my topography. You can see all the new points that I'm going to get here. Add lines. And of course, maybe delete some of the access points from before, which are not so relevant to me. This one is not relevant. Maybe over here there are some access points. Click on Finish. And let's go again to 3D and see if we solved our problem. So I'm going to use spot slope tool again. And you can see that my slope is continuous and all the water are going away from the house. So that's kind of an example of how when you have a linked architecture file and you're working both in 3D and 2D, you can use these environment topography tools not only to model, but also to kind of think about your design and figure out your design. I think that this piece over here may have taken me a lot longer if I would just do it in 2D rather in 3D.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So
any more questions?
A few people's questions. So that was, I think, for Trufi, even McDonough. You both asked, how to create, but also how to edit and how to integrate. So this integrates with the architectural buildings that are already there. It's how to create. You saw quickly she was able to create that and edit it once it was created, and you realize the flaws in the inherent system, and then you're able to edit it fairly fairly quickly. So those are, again, we're still at the beginning of like 92 questions. So,
Wow.
but I think some of those other questions will be similar to these. So, and actually there's one here that asks about, site analysis. So, can you show those, the elevation analysis tools quickly? Because that is for Mafinga. So we'll get that one in there. And if I give you a thumbs up, it's because I think we've answered your question. So if you see a thumbs up and you don't think I've gotten to it, maybe you can ask a follow-up if we hopefully have time to get to a few more. And then maybe after that, we'll talk about external data. So AutoCAD, Civil 3D imports.
All right.
All right.
So regarding analysis tools, in environment, we have two main tools, which is the elevation analysis and the slope analysis. Before I get into those, I want to say that as long as you're working in Revit, if you're working in a orderly fashion, I would say, and you have your existing site as a topography model, and then you have your new site, just like I showed you before, and you're actually able to get the cut and fill quantities for each and every element. And, you're able to, in this example, show your existing ground, in every section separately from your proposed design. So that for me is already a form of analysis that was not available to me working in CAD. And this is available so quickly. I remember my first Revit project where the client asked me, do you have an estimate of the cut and fill quantities? And I was so happy to get this question because I could email the answer to him in like 5 minutes. So that alone is a very strong, very powerful analysis tool in Revit, I think. Other than that, we do have in environment the elevation analysis and the slope analysis, which basically allow you to take any topography and run a custom-made analysis on top of it. And you can see that using environment, I can also create the legend for this analysis. So in this one, that's a slope analysis. It helped me analyze how many problematic slopes do I have in this project. And that's also a method of, understanding the cost, to predict the cost of the project, right? If I had a lot of problematic slopes over here, I would know that the project would be more expensive. But since most of the slopes that I have are relatively mild, then I know it would not be so expensive. And when you create it with environment, it's essentially a 3D element, and it allows you to get an area calculation of how much area do you have with this slope, etc. And you can do exactly the same with the elevation. So if I go to the 3D site over here, and let me just turn on the color analysis filter, then you can see that it's actually a 3D element. But I actually, every tool that we have here, you can see in our user guide over here at Arc Intelligence user guide. And the reason I'm not showing it right now is because we had so many great questions, and I kind of want to leave time for some additional questions. Does this make sense, Emily?
Yeah, it does. And actually, I wanted to call attention to Sam. You asked about sustainability, environmental sustainability being a priority, and how Revit can help in that. So I just want to say, if you need to promote those natural drainage patterns, you have a tool right here in the analysis tools to see the actual drainage patterns as they are on the site and work with them instead of against them. So hopefully that's going to help you right there, just to see what you already have, and then be able to just, use what you've got, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel in that one. So, if you've got follow-up, let us know. So let's see, we've got, how well can Revit handle highly detailed terrain? Well, I don't know what to say about that one. I know that Revit in general triangulates rather than necessarily gives you some smoother contours. So it would be a matter of the number of points that you have and the weight of the file. And so one of the things that we definitely recommend in dealing with detailed terrains is breaking it down into smaller pieces if possible, so that you can, when you're editing it, it has a smaller amount of stuff to think about. Anything to add to that?
No, you hit the point. I think that a lot of times there is this misconception that site models should be one big topography that represents the existing site with the modification of the new design. And
Yep.
If you are working on the entire site with just one topography, then it's going to be, first of all, it's going to be very heavy on your file. And second of all, it's going to make your life so much harder because it's very confusing to work in such a way. And third, it's also a little bit not accurate to the actual building process of a project where you have different materials, different slopes, different functions. And so using this method of breaking them down into small pieces, it will be easier to edit, but it will also be easier to get very, very detailed topographies in there. And I think if you just let me open another presentation that I had over here, I can show you, for example, here's a project with tons of very, very accurate, very detailed topographies that I used, different methods to create each of them depending on what I needed at the moment. But it held up very, very well. If you're a road engineer and you're working on 60 kilometers of a road, then I'm not sure that Revit is your tool. But if you're a road engineer and you're working on a specific street, then definitely Revit would be a useful tool to do that. So I would definitely go with your answer. Just break it apart and make sure that you're working with each part the way it should be. And then you can get to a very, very accurate result. Again, in my opinion, I got better results than CAD because I could see it in 3D and I could design it in 3D and understand what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yes, I tried to do a really large site in chunks, but the chunks were still too large, and I spent a lot of time waiting for Revit to just think about all those points. So definitely detailed, yes, smaller segments, a must. So, all right. Now, there's a number of people that have asked about topo surface versus topo solid. So I'll just cover that one briefly. Topo surfaces are, it's like tinfoil. That's it. You have a surface, but you have no depth to it. You can't control the layers. You have no visuals when you cut a section through it. And when you move to a topo solid, when you cut a section through it, it acts like a floor or any other, 3D, horizontal object that we've been using so far in Revit. And if you don't know what that means, it means that you have the ability to have layers within the system. So when you cut a section through a topo solid, I can see the layer of, the surface material, the tile, the gravel, the stone. Then I see the substrates underneath in specified layers. How thick do you need it? Does that layer need to taper as it moves across an area, right? I have the ability to sort of taper or make a variable layer so that it can be thicker or thinner as it approaches a drainage scenario. And it just looks better. That's the other one. It just looks better when you cut a section. You've got all of those layers visible and all of the materials applied to them. It allows you to calculate more in terms of how much of this material that I use and so on. So if you're making that transition and you're not sure you should move forwards into 2024 because topo solids are a big change, they're actually way better. There's still some adjustments that have to be made, on the Revit side of things. But from the landscape architecture's point of view, they leave you with a much more holistic product for so many reasons. So hopefully there's a whole bunch of you that have asked that question, and hopefully that answers it for most of you. Okay.
I hope that my screen was showing while you were talking, because everything you said I kind of demonstrated. So yes. I hope that you guys got the better idea of it.
And actually, there's one question that says, can you demonstrate a typical workflow for converting a surface into a solid? So, Laura, this is actually a tool that is with environment. And at first, when I got 2024, I just assumed that there was a tool for this. And then I realized not too long later that it was actually because my environment tool was providing that, and it wasn't a default Revit feature. So there is a one-click, essentially, button to do this. Is there any details that I need about that? And there's a little toggle inside the the topography tools within the environment tab. But if you click on a surface,
my computer is
having a glitch. I can share my screen if
it's really tired, but yeah, you can share your screen.
All right. So Missy, would you mind switching our screens for us? Perfect. All right. So this is actually a topo surface that I have in a 2024 file. And first of all, there is a generate topo solid tool. And then there is a topography tools. This is the topography tools here. And there is a little toggle here that will switch from one to the other. And I've got a few little glitches in that topo surface, but that's okay. So topo surface, topo solid, finish. And it'll just take a little second to process. And I now have an actual topo solid with a thickness. I still have to edit this. I've got to check on what the details are of it. But here's my topo solid information. All right.
Yeah, and I think that's another great example of how, when we built the topography tools, we tried to create a situation where you don't need anything else. You could just use the topography tools to do anything topography related, because a lot of times for people it was confusing. When do I have to go to messing inside? When do I have to go to environment? So what we did, we took everything that messing inside had, put it in the topography tools, and then added the rest of the topography tools to just allow you to be there and work within this interface.
Yeah. And when it comes to topo solid, if anybody did any landscape work using floors, you use them as your hardscape or softscape surfaces, you might have used, do I have a floor in here? I think everything is a topo solid now. You may have used I still have these tools, the modify sub-elements tools to create a point, create a slope. If you've made a roof or a floor and you need a drain in it, you can slope to that point. These tools have now been carried forward. As you can see here, this is a topo solid to the topo solid tools and are in the topography tools now in environment for Revit. So you do not have to switch. You're always in the environment tools in this one window when you're working. So everything is here in place. Point, draw a split line, and also adding and modifying all of your tools, including the reference surface. This edit sketch is for your reference surfaces and any edits you need to make to the shape of your topo solid. So that's one of those. So let's see. So somebody asked, what resources or plugins are available to extend the capability of Revit in topography? Well, that's this environment for Revit. There are additional plugins, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So mainly this is environment for Revit. I'm going to say, having experienced a few of the other ones, this is the one that's going to get you the closest to a viable workflow. It doesn't only manage your planting families, and it doesn't only, import this or that. It is sort of a full service. It imports, that's what we were supposed to get into. It imports external civil data. It will import Rhino data right now and allow you to export this information back. too.
Yeah.
So,
I think, Emily, it's, well, I'm a little bit bribed because I work for Environment for Revit, but I'm definitely happy to say that currently we're the best in the market. We offer the most wide variety of tools. And every time when people are checking the competition, I'm so happy to hear they're coming back to us. And that's, the result of the relentless work of our programmers. We have a very big team of programmers. They're all geniuses. They're all amazing. And I'm not ashamed to say I think we're the best tool in the market right now. And I would be happy for everyone to check that. And yeah, I would love to go to the question of the Civil 3D and CAD and interoperability question, talk about that a little bit.
Sure. All right. Now I've got my screen shared and I have the file up and I haven't added anything to it yet in this, just in case. So, for adding Civil 3D. So we've got in this site, we've got a little bit of a sample Civil file. So this, if we were in Civil 3D, is what we might see, right? We've got export options here to land XML file. We're exporting points, corridors. If you know Civil 3D, this will make sense to you. I'm no expert. So this is a bit of a sample of what we are going to try and import into this site. So this is sort of the corridor. This is what's been created in Civil 3D. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit the external Civil 3D external Civil data tool. We've got an import and an export. So when I click on the import option, it looks like I have imported one final topography. So let's go add more Civil data. So this is starting from scratch if you want to get into this. You're going to look for that Civil data. You're going to browse to that XML file. So I've got sort of that original street export from XML. I can choose specifically what elements I want visible from that XML file. So let's say I'm just looking for the road corridors. I can turn off whole topography surfaces, or individual surfaces from that that portion of the Civil file. I can see roadways or import roadways, and I can see what they are, supposed to be, right? Sidewalk. Well, now I could go.
I don't know if we have some road engineers in the crowd today, but if they are working in Civil 3D, they really know what you're showing. In Civil 3D, when you these things, then you have corridors, thin surfaces. So the corridors are the roadways, the thin surfaces are the topographies, and we're also able to import alignments as well. So that's, if you guys don't know Civil 3D, so that's essentially what Emily is showing right now, that these are the components of the Civil 3D file, the way it's been designed by the engineer.
Yep, and we can use them with a decent level of detail and assign some then Revit attributes like materials to them. So I can go through here and make some choices. I'm going to turn off the alignments here because we're not going to deal with those. And I'm going to click OK. And I can set up my coordinate system. I'm going to stick with shared and say OK as well. And a couple seconds, and I will have a preview of what I'm about to import. Of course,
it's also usually heavier if you're using the corridor itself, because basically a corridor in Civil 3D is a solid element, a lot of time with the layers of the paving, with the curbstones. So a lot of times I find myself only importing the thin surfaces from Civil 3D, which are the same elevation, but are kind of lighter. So it just depends on what exactly it is you need to import. And you can see that there's a lot of junk in Civil 3D files, right? So when you're going through this list, Emily, you could just click on the X, on the red X at the bottom, and just delete the big topography if you don't need it. So just delete it from your file. So the way we build the interface really allows you to clean up the junk, reload from, so you can really decide what elements from the Civil 3D file you want to take into your file.
Perfect. And you can always come back in here and edit it. So if you think you got everything and you hit OK and then you go, oh God, I didn't need that, or I don't want that, you can always come back, grab the Civils 3D and just expand what it is that you have imported and go down and find something. Maybe I don't need this surface because I have it already in Revit from another source, and you hit the delete button. So there is all kinds of editing options. The other one is, let's say this was round 1 and now we need round 2. Right? They've issued an update. They've changed it. I can import now the second version of this, and I'm not going to just yet. I would want to delete probably the original.
Reload from. Just click on it and then go from. And it just, it's like, it behaves like a link, essentially.
Exactly.
Where you can reload from, or delete.
So you don't have that duplicate data. And so reload from, we should all be familiar with this if you're using Revit or even AutoCAD. They have a reload your link option. So you resource that to the newest copy. Now we've got 3 minutes left, and I'm sorry, we have 155 questions that I haven't even looked at. So I know a lot of them are similar as far as, explaining the processes of creating and editing. So we've covered a number of that already.
Can I show one last thing if we have only 3 minutes?
Misty, would you be kind?
Absolutely. And I want to let everyone know this has been incredible and amazing, and we love your guys' questions. If we don't get to them, don't worry about it. We're going to reach out to you and maybe even dive into some webinars on some of these topics, but I'll turn it over to you. So I know we have just a few minutes.
Yeah, all right. So it's a good idea, Misty. First of all, I know that GRAITEC are amazing and they're going to reach each and every one of you. I'm going to take a look at the questions and maybe post something on LinkedIn trying to answer as many questions as possible. But just to wrap up, I think a really nice thing would be to show you how I can actually use Civil 3D as my reference surface. So in this case over here, I had the civil engineer, which was me in this instance. I just wanted to give this example, right? Because I know that a lot of times the civil engineer has the grading and then the landscape architect is doing the layout, right? So in this case, I just used the external civil data to import the civil engineer, the finished grading. And then I used environment topography tools to turn this thing from Civil 3D into my reference surface. And that's essentially how I was able to align my design with the grading from the civil engineer. So that makes for, seamless collaboration. I think that there are like some amazing tools that we didn't really get the chance to show. I know we got a lot of questions about CAD collaboration. So we do have the Get Blocks option, for example, that allows you to turn CAD blocks into Revit families, including all the attributes and the information. We do have the alignment tool, which is, I can't believe we didn't get to touch that, but that's an amazing tool that actually gives you like Civil 3D abilities within Revit, which is amazing. So, Misty, I can only hope we will do another webinar like that, I guess. But I also invite people to just check out, Arc Intelligence YouTube channel and reach out to GRAITEC, for more information about Environment for Revit. We have a 30-day free trial. So you could just, if you tech savvy, you could just explore it on your own. There are a lot of options, and it really depends on what you want to do. But yeah, there's a free trial. So much more I want to talk about.
and I think we're out of time.